Welcome, everybody, to Aeon Byte. Welcome to the desert of the real. As always, my name is Miguel Connor. I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, and hopefully your Ubix spray to take away that smell of colitas rising up through the air. Welcome, everybody, to this live show. Here we are in this Bardo between St. Patrick's Day and the equinox. Can't think of a better place for that gnosis. And we will be talking about some of our favorite saints. And it is always a delight and a pleasure and an honor to have James Tunney today to discuss a whole lot of heresy. James, thank you very much for coming back on the show.
Great. Thanks for that introduction. It's hypnotic. I always do a good introduction, and I look forward to our conversation.
Always. Thank you very much for the kind words. And yes, always enjoy our conversation here, email, anywhere we can actually get the chance to talk while we still can, while we're still in a camp or something.
Yeah.
Censored or whatever it is, we're still here kicking. So awesome. And with us too, we got Graham Pong. Graham, thank you very much for being here and supporting us.
Oh, very happy to be here, Miguel. Happy to fill in for Vance when he needs a pinch hitter, and looking forward to being able to finally figure out the difference between the transhumans and the posthumans out there.
Indeed. And do you have Irish blood? I have no idea. I know your real first name, but I don't know your real last name.
Oh yeah, no, definitely have Irish blood. You know, my one of my distant ancestors was BFFs with St. Patrick, helped him set up the whole church over there.
I'm kind of worried because I know 3 Irishmen in one place. Things can't go well ever.
Throw some whiskey, James, and we're in big trouble.
Yeah, exactly. No, I haven't had a drink of alcohol since 1999, and my favorite beer was Guinness. I still miss the taste. I'm not going to drink today, but Guinness was my Guinness and a side of whiskey was heaven on earth. Well, it became hell on earth, but it used to be heaven on earth. So.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I gave up drinking a few years ago, and I enjoyed it, and that, but it's just time sometimes to move on, you know. So.
Good for you. Yeah. More productive, better sleep, all that, right? So awesome, James. Anything, as we were talking about, I love some of your advice on celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and it worked for me. Any wisdom about St. Patrick's Day? I don't know if you were on Chris's podcast a while ago. Great conversation between you and Mr. Knowles, as always. And he always puts out a yearly blog where he ties St. Patrick's to Osiris, the green man, the barley. And, and he talks about how during the revolution, Washington actually made the 17th a holiday because he was so grateful for the Irish that fought with him there. And many of the Irish were Freemasons. And, if they're Freemasons, what kind of rituals are going to soak through? So I don't know if you've read that or you have any thoughts on St. Patrick's Day for the audience.
Well, St. Patrick's Day is a real figure that we have, despite the fact that they're trying to turn him into or to wash him out of history. He's a real figure, and a very important aspect. We have 2 elements of his writing, and they're very interesting on their own to describe his sensation and also his kind of humility. But what is interesting about Christianity in Ireland, which is critical to remember. Now, this is before the Norman Catholics came, but in the golden period when Ireland was the island of saints and scholars, I have explained elsewhere that what happened, in my view, in particular around 536, was with the volcanoes going around the world, that the Druids and Christians made a more conscious bridge, but it wasn't enforced upon Ireland. And in order to, from all the stories, and I believe there's truth in them, in order to convert the pagan people, then you had to demonstrate that you were a superior magician. This is a story that comes true and true. And when you look at the reports of Columba's life, it was clear that he had no problem dealing with shining beings from the air, or exerting power over animals or whatever. So this is an area that the church later got too cold feet about. They began to reject this. We can even see it in the Bible, the sons of thunder. But this was a clear thing. The idea was, I suppose, that if you had the highest magic, the divine magic, that you could demonstrate it over the inferior magicians. And of course, the inferior magicians were kind of put out of business when the sun didn't shine, because the sun was a critical part of their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
My view is quite different from a lot of people. I think in the Western world, in the late 20th century, really people have been persuaded by the military-industrial complex to throw out the baby in the bathwater, and it has been that's gone on for decades. Another interesting story. But in relation to the universality of St. Patrick, it was brought home to me in a number of different contexts. But one example, I was in New Orleans around the time of Mardi Gras, and I went into the Voodoo Museum. I was very interested in that history, and I was surprised to see in there a statue of Saint Patrick, as you might see in a Christian brother. And I was curious, and I said, why is he here? I was intrigued, and they said, well, in West Africa we had the god who had power over snakes, and this is Saint Patrick. So this is actually a relevant bit in relation to my understanding of Elvis in relation to syncretism, which I think is a critical background, arguably in relation to a kind of ability from a cosmopolitan perspective to draw on different sources. And again, going back to the idea that if your spiritual system, or internally and exoterically, possesses the trump cards, you don't have to fear the lower cards. I don't understand this process. You don't have to be afraid, because by definition your claim must have some validity to it, and hopefully not one which is enforced by force. And this is the problem with spiritual consciousness. Say, in a Christian perspective, if we think of the way when Jesus left, the Holy Spirit was left in his place. Now, this is what the ordinary people in Ireland took up. So old women that were deeply religious, deep connection with the land, could embrace what were effectively pagan customs in the whole view, in a kind of syncretistic way. They didn't have any problem, because they had this Holy Spirit, but it doesn't appear in the books. It doesn't appear in the same way. So there's living traditions which continued. And this is the thing, I heard someone talking about paganism and explaining the way that Celtic paganism is reconstituted, and it's not. It's dying out now, but it was integrated into religious practice, into folk practice, and survived. Yeah, that's why Yeats and people could tap into it. So Patrick is an amazing figure, with Columba, with Bridget, and actually another figure, Saint Alba, who is in English Saint Elvis. This is one of the possible origins of the name Elvis, a reference to the Celtic Ireland or Welsh name. So the influence of these cultures, it is going to be wiped out. I believe a lot of this culture is going to be wiped off. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't have a positive view about it. I don't think people understand the assault that is going to be on the consciousness of humanity. And Ireland had an incredible spiritual tradition which could embrace all these things and be comfortable with them. And when I look back at, for example, my father's uncles, who were revolutionaries, they were revolutionaries, they were strictly Catholic, and they wrote poetry about ancient goddesses. There was no inconsistency. And there's this idea, which I think is very important, about a superposition, I think, that we can have, that we can hold different equations, and you don't have to reject them in your head. You can have a value, a sustaining value at the top, But I don't see this inherent threat that a lot of people see, and it's a very dangerous thing. It makes a thing very fragile. So St. Patrick is a figure, a real figure that has had influence and that has profound influence, and whose story has continued to be of relevance, and even motifs, as you well know, the shamrock and the triune and the three, and the significance of this, and its link with India, whatever, all the cultures. We're crazy if we throw these things out, and we're crazy if we let them be secularized when they're not always secularizable. We can, we have to be a bit careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So and he was one of the reasons why these figures are dangerous. And this is another very important point that I may have mentioned it to you before, that when I looked back at some of the text, it was clear that the Normans, who I believe are the center of this New World Order, essentially, they're the brains behind it, the rulers, the military tacticians, the expanding empire came from them, the Angevins. They were always afraid of the Celtic saints, and if they were afraid of them, I think is good enough reason to hold on to them.
Agreed. Yeah, we can get into that. Yeah, I agree with you, James. It reminds me when I was a kid, I was in Belém, Brazil, and they had the yearly festival to the Virgin Mary, where we go out to the beach and there's this thing. And I'm like, oh, Virgin Mary, Mom. And she turns around, that's Imanja too. In my mom's Catholic mind, there was no problem with Virgin Mary and this ancient Brazilian goddess. Perfect. That's the good side of the Catholic Church for all its issues. And like you said, yeah, we live in this either or Manichaean where both sides, right and left, want to cancel everything. Other thing is, yes, for the audience, I will be having an interview in April with Andrew Phillips Smith. We will be talking about, yes, the St. Elvis Cathedral in Wales. We'll be talking about the cunning men and the fairies. So more to come. And it's interesting too with the Druids. There are traditions that the great Gnostic heretic Simon Magus is the fountainhead of the Druids, or really influenced the Druids. So just putting that stuff out, James.
Yeah, there's all kind of crossovers, and again, it's to find the commonality and to find the ways that they can be complementary. Which I think, again, when we come to look at the paradoxes of Elvis or Philip K. Dick, we have this ability to look right across the spectrum, which a lot of people don't really. Well, they know less about Elvis in that sense, which is good that you're bringing that to people's attention.
I am indeed. And yes, when I was in Graceland, you walk out to his gravesite and there's a statue of Jesus, Buddhist materials. The whole place is this syncretic mess. You find synchronicity in this. And of course, Philip K. Dick. Both men were just like, throw it in the blender and then look for the energies underneath. When Elvis was picking music, he didn't know how to read music. He barely knew how to read. He was looking for what was underneath, the plight of the slaves in blues and jazz, the beautiful call for the Holy Spirit and gospel music in the South. He liked Italian opera. He was looking for that archetypal energy. That's, those forces,
the grace.
primordial forces.
As you said it there, the grace. So Graceland, amazing grace. And that's also a word that comes up a lot in Philip K. Dick's exegesis, grace. And it's a kind of word that we dismiss. And there's different emphasis in Catholicism, Protestantism, but in the sense that Elvis is talking about it, he's drawing on that the deep spirituals and that sense in the music of the slaves and that tradition to find that living grace. And it's a real force, which is a thing that people don't understand. And this is part of this literalism that denies that this is actually ontologically real. It's an issue I have when I'm talking to Jungian or people who are really interested in Jung, and I'm interested in Jung, but there is an issue about what extent he's accepting these things as ontologically real outside if they can be. Now, I do. I think there are forces that exist and are transmutable, and they bring it to a different place. And both of these people were open to inspiration, and of course, Elvis shows it in his music in a very literal sense.
Oh yeah, very much. I mean, he himself stated, he said, when I hear, black gospel, I can hear the yearning of the black people for their real home, for their old God. He knew that's what's at the bottom of it. It's there's again the top level imagery, and then there's that beautiful energy underneath. And it doesn't matter the music, religion, it's there for us, isn't it, James, to
Yeah,
tap
it's
into.
very interesting. In the film, in the end of the film, Sullivan's Travels, uh, I always used to like the end, and of course, when the prisoners are brought to the black church out in the swamp, and there's this beautiful, beautiful singing, "Go Down Moses," a great baritone, I think he was, and then they bring in the prisoners, and he's telling them not to look down their noses at them. I mean that this, and there's a great humility in it. But it's interesting. The end of the film, they show the cartoons, and they say, "Oh well, laughter, television. This is," and that gives they take it and they bring it into a different direction. When I looked at it again, I saw something different than the beauty, but the power of those songs and the power of grace was something that Elvis's intuition was very open to, and also, again, in this, accepting that he came from a Protestant background, at the same time he sings remarkably in 1972 Our Lady of the Rosary, which recites the Hail Mary in it, which is kind of remarkable for a mainstream person to do. And also, I read recently, because I was talking about Garabandal, and apparently he had a medal, or he was given a medal by one of the people who were very interested in Our Lady of Garabandal. So you have this openness, and that's why, going across the boundaries. And once you have that openness, you can begin to, open yourself to the different forces, but also open yourself to respect for different traditions, to enable to see the different traditions, and to seek the kind of perennial wisdom that's underneath, as well as open to the gnosis with a small g of the knowledge, the feeling of the thing, of the spirit.
Yeah, and I think both Philip K. Dick and Elvis also knew it wasn't enough to know. Again, as I write in the book, Elvis had workers carrying around 200 books of spirituality wherever he went, even in his Vegas suite. It was just like Yogananda, Manly P. Hall books. And of course, we know Philip K. Dick was just living in the library. But you have to experience this. Both men believed that it's not enough to know, you have to experience. The veil has to be open, right, into this other
Yeah.
realm.
And that's we used to do a bit of capoeira, especially with the kids, and they were small, and just to participate, and again, you have that same syncretic idea, the West African culture, the Brazilian culture, the Catholic culture mixing in a way, and the sense that the spirits are coming down into, that the spirits are there when there's a good hota, and when people are moving, and you do get a kind of sense. It's very mesmerizing with the beat and the monochord, going back to Plato, and that. So you do have that very strong sense. But another, and I know that you've made a deep study of the parallels, but in relation to knowing, one point which is important is relation to why you want to know, and what is it that makes you really want to know. And ultimately, some people think, for example, trauma makes one want to find solution. It could be, it can be that. But there's also the question of, it's often when people see the reality of something which is evil that they begin to say, hold on a second, what is the contrast to this? What is the contrast to that spiritual darkness? And in both cases, for Philip K. Dick and for Elvis, 1964 was a key, 1963-64.
Right.
So, as you know, Elvis meets Larry Greer,
Geller.
and that really is Greer, is it? Or what's
Geller. Yeah.
Geller, that's right, of course, yeah,
Mhm.
Geller. Yeah, Larry Geller, and he, I don't know why I said Greer, but he makes him aware of a whole range of different ideas and theosophy. And of course, when we're talking about theosophy, a lot of people limit it to Blavatsky, and I know they are very interested in Blavatsky, but theosophy, of course, means really about wisdom and God, and it's an ancient tradition. It's not limited to theosophy with a capital T. And again, that theosophical, the God and Sophia is a critical element to a lot of Gnosis, as we know, and even the critiques of someone like Jung in relation to the conceptualization of the world. So Larry Geller introduces him to a kind of eclectic range, and he's obviously got an appetite. And you don't do that unless you have an appetite. And of course, Philip K. Dick sees the vision in the sky in 1963, which he doesn't know as God or evil, but he concludes it's evil. It brings him back to the Episcopalian Church. Saint Columba, actually, it was the church he goes to.
Interesting.
Another little odd synchronicity in California. Our father's family, were supposedly from that same, or appear to be from the records, from the same sect as Columba. So I like him. But anyway, so you have this continuity. If Columba had came to America, his monks may have, before Columbus did, America would have been a different place. I can assure you. So he sees this evil in the sky, and of course, then we have the assassinations on November 22nd. Not only is Kennedy assassinated, we have C.S. Lewis dying and Aldous Huxley dying, but we had a major trauma. And that major trauma, especially if we see it from Elvis's perspective, he's aware that he's in the firing line. Who's doing this? It's quite clear that these powers are demonstrating the power that they have and the environment that we're living in. And both of them, at a similar time, move on. We focus on 1974 a lot, but actually 1963 for Philip K. Dick, and then we go back to his very productive short story era, 52, 53, remarkable work there. And then his first schoolboy kind of essay, going back another 10 year or for 44 to when he was a schoolboy writing about slavery and in the future.
Yeah.
So it was there in his DNA. And of course, with these assassinations, I believe that in that ethos, that people began to understand that the world is not really as we believe it to be. And I kind of advance a hypothesis, no more than that, that actually the New World Order had taken over by 1964. It hasn't. It's not starting now. It's not starting in the future. That really it was the 100 years from 1863 to 1963, and that 1963 was a different phase. And that's 20 years after Winston Churchill had said the next empire will be the empire of the mind. It's 40 years after the 1920s work, The World of Flesh and the Devil. It's 50 years after H.G. Wells writing some of this, So this is not new. People telling me, people seem to be under the illusion that the New World Order is cracking up and the elites are on the run. They don't understand. I'm sorry, don't want to disillusion you, but they're full steam ahead. It's a multi-point attack, and they're doing very well. It's the opposition.
So the empire is not ending. The empire is not ending.
It's doing very, very well. That's why. But I do think that was an incentive for them to begin to try and get a sense, and that also opened up Philip K. Dick to more specific explanations for the cosmic context, to build on his pre-existing idea that that the world is going to a strange place.
Yeah, fascinating, and it's interesting too, James. Yeah, with Dick and Elvis, we of course, as I draw the parallels of the trauma that you're talking, that was part of it, losing their twin at birth, abject poverty that people don't understand, that both Dick was eating horse meat, Elvis would go as a kid hungry, very weird situations with her mothers. I mean, there's a whole of parallels, and also the silent generation. It's like Gen X. It's like it's been forgotten. You know how Gen X, we kind of got cast away. The silent
Yeah.
generation never got talking. They were also very, very strange, like the Gen X. But also in '63, I believe, or '64, no, '64. Elvis had a similar mystical experience. What James is talking is that Philip K. Dick was going to go to ride in his hut, and he saw the face of evil, this mechanical mask. And that was his first encounter, like you said, with the demiurge, with the head archon. Elvis had a similar experience. He was driving to Hollywood, and he got out and he saw the sky, the clouds parting, and he saw the face of what he saw pure evil, which was Stalin back then. And he and Larry saw it, and the face was trying to destroy them. And it really affected. Again, we're talking both saw reality as it was. Both were probably on amphetamines, but that's what opened their channels, unfortunately, and kind of cut their life short. But it's interesting. Both had those mystical experiences at the same time.
Yeah. My father was a very good Irish amateur boxer and because of that, he used to do a lot of. He was working on the dance halls all the way through it, so he saw all the different changes in music. And I remember asking him, I said, it must have been a big change when Elvis came along. And he said, no, it wasn't Elvis that did it. It was Bill Haley was the one that changed that culturally. And people forget about Bill Haley and the Comets. It's very, very interesting, the Comets, because the Comets always appear in. It appears when the Normans come over to Britain, 1066. And it was called the Long-Haired Star, which I've related also to the Beatles 900 years after when they come to America. There's a kind of a esoteric bit. And also, a lot of people are not willing to really embrace the idea. I know Coleman and people have written about it, but I've really come to a similar conclusion by a different route, that they don't really see the music industry in general as part of the propaganda system for some reason. They believe that it's a liberationary force. And if you look at the work of Michael Sargent, who wrote about mind control in Britain, who was a forerunner of a lot of stuff in the USA, who experimented with barbiturates and all this. So this is where it came from, of course, in the British Empire, experimenting with soldiers who came back from the front and couldn't function. So they were giving them anything, see what could happen. And then they discovered, after Dunkirk, when they came back, a lot of guys were traumatized. And he wrote a paper, Sargent, about how you could use trauma and process of abnegation to relive the experience and then alter the mind. And that became very, very critical. But also he wrote in Mind Control about what they had learned in Africa in anthropological studies, that the old guys trained the young men to dance until they were exhausted. And once they did that, they disempowered them. They took out this rebellious spirit. So they developed the elders in the tribes in Africa, as they'd studied them, had this system of control by giving them this freedom, apparent freedom to exhaust themselves. So when I see the power behind rock around the clock,
just
you go out, lads, and dance dance until you're exhausted, and then you're not going to be rebelling against this old guy. I'm serious. I mean, when you look at the blatant kind of obviousness of some of the bits, and a lot of people, again, Kittler in Germany, who's written about media a lot, he also asks the question about the music industry. Do you not understand that all this technology came in Germany, for example, from the state secret service listening devices, as well as that? Computer music, the first kind of record, it came from Bletchley Park. They began to hear strange music on the computers, and when they were looking at the Enigma code on that, and they began to realize the possibilities. So you have this direct crossover from the military-industrial complex into entertainment. There's this big shift. Now, I'm not saying they're all involved in this, but there's a degree. Every entertainer is involved or complicit in a propaganda system, and some manage, despite that, to get through the cracks and maintain some spirituality, some message. Elvis certainly did it in his, when he's looking at In the Ghetto and songs like that, where he's speaking across color lines and opening up as the African American musicians and leaders that went before him accepted that he was, he was being respectful towards their tradition, and he was opening doors as well in that time. So people, they're still working within the cracks. The system wants to use them, and of course his problems in relation to amphetamines, and that it started off really in the army, didn't it?
Exactly.
So there's also that abusive kind of context of the system which comes into play. And the last point, when you mentioned about the twin, of course, it's a critical parallel between them. And in some senses, I believe that this, having a strong perception of the lost twin, brings one to Corban's and Surawardi's man of light or woman of light, a sharper realization of the spiritual dimension that we all have, that is existing, is an extension of us, that we try and our higher self in some senses, whatever you want to call it. So I think there's an awareness of that, and there seems to be, once someone begins to get those awareness, they become aware of the dark element. Now you could call it the shadow, but there's also the shadow element in the wider sense, the shadow government, deep state, etc. And this, the simulacrum, the duality that's there, and it's there in the music itself. There's two differences. There's a difference between Bill Haley and Elvis, for example. They're doing different things, and things that came after, or in the 50s, the rockers. There's always this kind of duality that's also played as well.
Yeah, well said indeed. Yeah, Elvis had Jesse, Dick had Jane, and this issue consumed them all their lives. I mean, it's the sense of guilt. Why did it happen? Purpose. Why did it survive? What did Dick say when somebody asked him about Jane? Well, at least I got all the milk. There's this sort of, it haunts them, and it became a voice in their heads, both of them, always appearing in dreams, appearing in visions. It was I don't think
that seems to open them up to the reality of some other voices, not just the twin. I mean, it is even a bit difficult to understand how powerful this motif is. I mean, it is, and we also have this brothers and for other people that this duality, the sense of something missing, which opens them up in a positive and a negative sense. It becomes a driving force, and the guilt is the survivor guilt is really deep, and it's difficult for it's even difficult for me to come. I can cognitively understand it, but there's subtleties to it that obviously one misses if one hasn't had that experience. But it's the fruit of the context is very, very clear.
An interesting third we can throw in there with Elvis and Dick is Salvador Dali. While he didn't have a twin, his brother, who died like a year or two before him, was also named Salvador Dali. Exactly the same name. His parents reused it for him.
Really?
And it had a very similar. Seems to have a very similar effect as what happened with Elvis and Dick Tag.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's of course there is a biography which claims that Dali is Daly, going back to a Colonel Daly, which is another interest. But I'm not claiming that. But anyway, and also another little connection there. A lot of people don't understand that Dali became fascinated with Fatima as well, and
really?
he did a picture of hell. He was contracted to do a picture of a vision of hell, and according to the evidence, he went and met Lucia and converted a lot. It doesn't appear in a lot of the things, but there is a book written about it, so it's quite interesting. But the other element of this twin aspect is the doppelganger thing, which is odd in some sense, because it is strange that Elvis, and this is a point I'll explain about the AI and posthumanism bit that in a minute.
Sure.
So Elvis now lives on in AI context, his image, and this is another strange doppelganger of himself. And the same thing has happened to Philip K. Dick, of course, who doesn't have that charisma and the movement, but he has some deeper charisma of a different type, of an intellectual type and of a spiritual type, mystical type. And the strange thing, and we get into this interesting element, they're both represented. It's been very important for the advocates of AI to present this effigy of Philip K. Dick. And we have all this strange story about the losing head, which is another motif about the school. And that, but we have this strong desire to reproduce Philip K. Dick with the assumption that Philip K. Dick is in favor of this, or would be in favor of this, or is advocating this. Now, this is the thing that I have a strong sense on, and people can have different views. I don't, but I don't actually see that. But this doppelganger thing is another strange parallel between them, and about this living on. And then, as well as that, and there's a contrast. There is a contrast here between Philip K. Dick and Elvis. Now, I don't know. It could happen. I don't know if there's any evidence of anyone having experiences with Philip K. Dick afterwards in a spiritual sense, because of course he communicated, or he was there at the seances with Bishop Pike and his son, and he was a bit skeptical about this, the same as William James was. But we have the Ray Moody wrote a book about Elvis afterwards.
Yes. I cite that book.
Yeah. So we have this other strange spiritual or psychic phenomenon of the apparition of Elvis, which is a stark contrast with it's different because one is entertainment persona reproduced, and the other is the implications of something that purports to be ontologically or spiritually connected with, which is different, but it's still that double appearing, and which is testament to the deep spiritual power, because you can get, accepting that he was a great singer and a great mover and a great entertainer, and he was very handsome and he had that power over people. That's quite clear, and the charisma. But that doesn't explain spiritual power. You don't get that impact without some deeper element that people are perceiving in it. So there is something in this desire to replicate them again, which strangely reflects this twin element, this duality, this deeper element.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And of course, there's a lot more. Like Elvis, his mom wouldn't go see his brother's grave, so he was traumatized of that. And there was no therapy in those days I think Dick was better because he was in Berkeley and could sort of research and found Jung a lot, But Elvis, of course, was traumatized, and he made a friend. One of his early friends was Liberace. Liberace also lost his twin, but Liberace's solution was just live life, embrace the material. It's a bit, and Liberace told him, you need to have jumpsuits out when you go on stage in 55. Elvis is like, I know that's, he would adopt that 10 years later, but Liberace kind of told him, just embrace the material. So we have that. It's an interesting how he took this path, but Elvis was still, seeking, like Philip K. Dick and so forth.
No.
What do you think? I wanted to go back before we finally get into posthumanism, but to the silent generation, because I see Dick and Elvis as a Janus, the Roman god. One's looking this way, one's looking that way, because we all know that Dick, of course, made it his life quest to give us the warnings about technology. It's the old Ray Bradbury, I don't write about the future, I try to avoid it. I don't predict the future, I try to avoid it. So Dick was giving us the warnings that still matter today, but Elvis was completely different. He almost mastered technology, as they say, nobody exploited television like Elvis. Nobody knew how to be on the radio. His satellite concert in Hawaii in 73 was viewed by more people than the moon landing. He and the Colonel he knew when to go into films. He knew when to do this. It's like technology to Elvis was something that he could ride. Before he died, James, he was getting ready to do a Vegas show and have lasers come out of his little,
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
so he believed very much like, I don't know, many, that technology could be used and harnessed for good, while Philip K. Dick is sort of the other side. And I understand people don't understand that the silent generation, when they came out of World War II, they grew up in the Depression, so they knew about poverty. They saw their parents leaving them to the war. Then they came into this brand new, brave new world, right? America was this land of so much money, and there were satellites in the air, and there were nuclear bombs, and there were mass media was shrinking the world, and highways. It was this world that the human civilization hadn't seen since Atlantis, right? It
Mm.
was just this most powerful empire, and it was mind-blowing. And UFOs were there, and we wondered about communists and spies, and the world would end. And this generation had to deal with rock and roll, I think, was a way of dealing it. Bill Haley in the comments, I think rock and roll was supposed to be sort of science fiction all along, which is what Elvis and individuals like David Bowie understood: technology, science fiction, this brave new world. And it was a way of coping. And this generation was both hedonistic, the world's going to end anytime by a nuclear bomb or Russian invasion, but they're also more open to spirituality. Why is this happening to us? They started leaning on Black music, on Eastern philosophy, on they started expanding their mind way ahead of the beatnik, or during the beatniks and the hippies. So I don't know your thoughts, but I think it's interesting. You've got these two figures that kind of saw this new world and were trying to navigate what was happening.
Well, there is a question. There could be a classic duality that we have in the esoteric is a dual connection between the magician and the mystic, as we could see it in A.E. Russell and Yeats, for example. So it leads to a different conclusion and a different approach. So in this new environment, which is obviously a military industrial there's no way you can get away. These things don't happen. That's just it. But okay, except in the entertainment. These are there, and there's somebody going to be fronting these things. There's someone going to be in the shop selling the things. Now, that's not to belittle the thing, but the magician is going to use the power. Of course they are. The magician, that's what the magician does. The magician is going to love it. And as Arthur C. Clarke said, high technology is indistinguishable from magic. So, and if we look as well at the costumes of Elvis, there was also a few African-American magicians, stage magicians, that were going around beforehand who did seem to wear this clothes. You can see this this ethos there as well, very kind of bling, often white clothes and a lot of jewels and things like that, and rhinestones, whatever, on them, shiny. So again, it was the sign of the magician. So Elvis was a young man, and in a lot of senses, as you know, in a lot of the traditions, it's only in your 40s and 50s that the mystic, in some sense, or the elder mystic comes into being or goes into a different level of consciousness. So he would, whether he was going to be more mystical or more magical would have been a question. It's very possible that he could have said, right, I'm if he was able to do, he didn't seem to be able to get out of that downward spiral, but he did, as far as I remember, seem to say, I'm leaving this now, and I'm getting to the phase. And if you look at his music and his songs are so powerful because they're returning to very basic emotions, very basic things of the heart, which is why they are authentic. You could put on an act when you're singing in the ghetto, but he wasn't putting on an act when he was singing on the ghetto, So he's identifying with, and he had the historical context, and he had that capacity to identify because of his twin connection. There's an interesting question about where he's going. Whereas for me, Philip K. Dick is understanding that we're going to lose our mystical capability because of this system. He was perceiving it in a whole range of ways. So, but that's a classic. It's not necessarily a conflict. It's just a different emphasis that the magician, I'm not saying in a sorceress sense here, says, okay, I'll get on top of this. I'll get on top of this. I'll understand this better, and I'll apply it in a way that I can impress my spirituality on it. But that's the magician path. Whereas the mystic is going to be very skeptical about the simulacrum, because it is the same as the Elvis thing. It looks like him, but it's a simulacrum, and we don't know how to distinguish them easily. And even with reality itself. So there is a strong magical element, or at least, well, he's aware of magic and he's studying magic, but it's something deeper, and that magic also is in the spiritual tradition. It's in the kind of hoodoo in the southern states. It's in it's there as an undercurrent in the music as well. It's very, very in the syncretic religions around the Caribbean that in many ways would have been permeating the southern states that he had. And we look at, of course, New Orleans. New Orleans is very interesting, not just from the voodoo, but from other contexts. For example, because I had a French and Spanish history, its legal history is different. That's why it was easier to become a free person of color there, because their legal systems went back to the Roman law context, who had actual rules about slaves that persisted and led to more favorable position, because the British didn't have rules about slaves, because they didn't have slavery for a long period of time in Britain. Interesting cultural context. But the syncretism again influences in those ways, and also those natural magic, as opposed to, because if we accept that, one of the distinctions between kind of natural magic and divine light magic, and that I always see the mystic as aiming for the divine light tradition, or being closer to that, and that kind of natural magic, which would include the natural world or the technological world, is not as important for them, because it won't deliver the goods in their view. But yes, whether he would have continued with that would be an interesting thing. Certainly, he was into that, the appearance, which is the magician's kind of interest as well.
Brilliantly said, because that's the tentative title of my book, James, America's Magician. He knew this is the era, this is the spirituality, this is where we need to go.
I wasn't prompted. I didn't know that. I didn't consciously make that connection with your book, but actually, yes, that's what my instinct would be on that. So corroborate. It is that. It's clearly that. It's clearly a deep, and in a deep sense. And now he may have proceeded to a deeper level. All his interest in the ancient world, a deeper level of magic later on, or he could have gone a different. It depends. But his underneath his deep humanity comes through for me. Of course, the people say, "Oh, well, he did this and he did that." I don't really care. I don't know, and I'm not going to be able to know. But what is speaking is his concern, his and a strange thing. A lot of people can't see this. The humility that certain people, and certainly people that I have met who are successful, often have a humility that you don't expect to meet. But he had that humility, as well as that deep spiritual charisma.
Yeah, I agree. And well said indeed. Well, let's talk about posthumanism. Of course, we can bring in Elvis and Philip K. Dick anytime. I see a couple of super chats. Thanks for the support, Francis, and thank you for the support, Chester, as always. If you have any questions, please super chat them or hand them over to Graham. Do you have any question or comment right now, Graham?
No, I was going to say the only thing that popped into my mind is the idea of the the wizard, the magician behind the scenes, and I'm reminded of the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour, where they're all dressed up as wizards in their framing sequences, and
Yeah.
you know, and another one is George Carlin, kind of falls into that whole wizard category as well. Tag.
So, James, do you think
The frightening thing about George Carlin is that everything he said was true. It wasn't funny.
it was true?
I
It's
mean, it
coming.
was funny, of course, but really, if people had realized that he was telling the truth, every bit of it, I don't think they would have been laughing. This is a kind of time travel wizard. It is quite amazing, the things that he really perceived. Just a last point about,
Sure.
I was in London in August 1977. I was staying with my aunt, she's still there, God bless her, and she came in with a cup of tea in the morning. She used to make I can remember it vividly. She came in with this very strong tea that, as I say, you could trot a mouse across. I remember coming in, a country woman from Ireland, saying, "Elvis is dead. Elvis is dead." You know,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was a big. And that same day, I remember also, because it was in North London, Euston, Camden Town area, which was the centre of the music. A lot of the music came from there. That's where all the bands really started off in Camden. It's now the Camden Palace, whatever it was called. And I remember her coming back from the shop and saying, now, if I was going to ask her, I may have asked her, not sure if she remembered. As far as I recall, she said that the punks are gathering outside the local church. You know,
Oh, wow.
and this is another connection that's kind of difficult to make. And afterwards, I was thinking the punks, you know, because Camden Town was the centre of the punks. In '77, that was when Johnny Rotten starts off trying to get on another fella whose family was from Ireland, as that happens. All the Clash, etc. They're knocking around at this, but the assumption would be, in many senses, that there's a big conflict between them, but that didn't seem to be the case. And the deep impact that had, and you also have that transition then, and this is the kind of strange conflict, because punk rock, despite the claims about breaking boundaries and all, punk rock and Elvis didn't look to be in the same things initially, and then on a super official value. Now, certainly there was a lot of posers and a lot of frauds and a lot of charlatans, although I think people like Johnny Rotten, and that was genuinely what he was purporting to be. But that was another, the last kind of memory I have of the kind of powerful iconography, apart from the fact that I would have bought his records first when I was small. I remember there used to be in Ireland the gypsies, the travellers, as they're called now, travel around. They used to, kind of a working class area in North Dublin. There used to be green spaces then, and they were still coming in the caravans and the horses with their arrows. Even I remember the young fellas had them. They'd be out hunting the rabbits or whatever. Still even in Dublin. And I remember we used to go down and hang around. It was I mean, this is a culture that has been doing this for hundreds of years on these same spots. It's quite remarkable to see it. It's gone now in the movement thing because the councils didn't want them moving around, whatever, settled community. But I remember looking into one of the caravans, and there was. They used to say in Ireland that people have a picture of the Pope and John F. Kennedy, and in the settled communities.
Yeah.
There was a picture of us looking in, and I remember a picture of Jesus and a picture of Elvis Presley, and it stuck in my head that Elvis. And then if you think about, because of course there was the document found about his family coming from County Carlow or Wicklow, 70-75, and a lot of the travellers used to have the comb back greased. They had a deep affinity with Elvis, and I remember someone, I don't know who's saying, well, he's one of our own in some senses. There was this, so it's this ability from different groups to see him as one of their own. So you don't speak, and especially at that stage, they were a marginalized community. This is the environment that, say, Tyson Fury's father would come from. Now he's a multi-millionaire then, but then, I mean, they were living in very poor conditions. It's quite a remarkable transformation. But Elvis was there in those contexts. Just a little point. Sorry.
Oh, no, thanks for sharing. And yes, I mean, Joey Ramone from the Ramones always said there was nobody more punk than Elvis. You can find that online. The Clash, they were gaga over Elvis. In fact, London Calling and Elvis's first album, they on purpose made the same exact design with the font. So yeah, Elvis was certainly punk, and the punk community knew it. So no secret there, James. So talking about posthumanism, you say many, I don't know if you want to start with the Normans, talk about that, or talk about now, because many people might be thinking, well, it's the internet age. The leader of the free world, Biden, doesn't know where he is. People hate politicians. People hate corporations. So, but you saying that the empire is just getting warmed up?
Yeah, I don't want to say that in a depressing way.
We want to hear the truth, or else we can't find the tools.
Yeah, absolutely, and until people begin to come up with a sound historical analysis, which is not talking about the Jews or anything, because I mean that's just not historically correct. And I have laid out a specific pathology, if you like, that I believe is consistent. I will continue to do so because it's clear. It's been laid out. If you read the vast amount of work that H.G. Wells has written about, and the people, what happened really, and again, Ireland is involved in this again, but with the urban civil or guerrilla war, for example, and the flying columns in the country when they were attacking the British Army, there was the emergence of a variant of actually what the Spanish and Portuguese had done when they were fighting against and fighting the Peninsular Wars with the Duke of Wellington, not a Dublin man, but this guerrilla tactics was a problem for the British Empire. And what they realized, and what they had begun to come to in the 20th century, building on what I call the empire of scientism, where they understand that, well, all technology and science can do the job of governance. This is where psychology comes from. The whole thing, it was a movement away from the spirit. 1863 again, starting period, around the time of the Great Exhibition in London, when Dostoevsky comes to London and says, "Hold on a second, this is Baal. This is all this technology is Baal." Well, he couldn't believe it. It was he perceived what was going on underneath it. This is the start of the submarine cables following the British sea routes, the telecommunication, the start of this network of the world. And we had and of course you had the Civil War in the United States, and the growth of the massive armaments, building capacity. And you had the forerunner of this network, the network's global system, and the development of a political ideology to explain it, that the empire would transmute itself through a combination of socialism and capitalism working together to achieve a scientific elite governing the world. And that's laid out in the New World Order, the Open Conspiracy. It's laid out in Bernal, J.D. Bernal, The World, the Flesh and the Devil. These are all in the 20s, and you can add in a range of them who were most of them were Stalinist scientists. Most of the major crystallographers and that were Stalinists. It goes with a very deep sense of materialism. So that's clear. Bukharin came over to London in 1930, and they really began to work together. And when Stalin dies, Bernal writes an obituary saying that Stalin was a great scientist, etc. So it was a deep materialism. It was a deep rejection, of the spirit. Idea that would be able, the upper class, of course, the privileged class, genuinely privileged people, would be able to bring in their Malthusian ideas of population control with eugenics. They're breeding things as a mode of governance on a global scale through the transmutation into corporate socialist, alternating things. And of course, the Bolsheviks were formed in London. Trotsky meets Lenin for the first time near King's Cross. Marx is based in London. You don't have to be a genius to begin to work it out. All right up to the present day, of course, you have the Soros goes study in the LSE. It's right through the imperial connection continues. Anyways, so all your UFOs and that, all that explained thing in the United States started off in Britain in 1943. The program was started a joint program, as was the computer program from Bletchley Park. When they had the AI summit recently, they're meeting in Bletchley Park. It's gone back home because they never relinquished control. The CIA, of course, Camp X, Canada, input into the United States. Even when we're talking about Berkeley, when we look at the foundation of Berkeley, it's an extension of empire. That was what the founders described it as. So, I mean, so what has happened is that the use of military force through apparent withdrawal transmuted into financial, regulatory, global institutions under the rubric of certain things like humanism, for example. Humanism was altered in the 30s to become something different than a general consideration of humanism. And who is the person that defines transhumanism? It's Julian Huxley, who is recognized as a great humanist. So transhumanism came out of this brand of humanism. So anyway, that the global organizations, he's of course becomes head of UNESCO. All these global organizations, food and agricultural organization, all the financial things, the movement of money to Dubai, the City of London, all that is linked to a transmutation. And it's nothing ethnic about it. It's nothing national, because of course the Normans were never really English. They were the early kings couldn't speak English, and then later on they get Germans involved. It's a network, and the network. Nothing got to do, no interest in the English people and the British people. They're willing to sacrifice them in their millions, and they, and continue to do so. And now are, calling them up, wanting to call them up again across Europe. They sacrificed. These networks are willing to sacrifice their people. And again, it goes, in my view, it goes back there. And in that tradition, or as we see it in Wells, and we see it in J.D. Bernal in particular. Who was the father of the science of sciences. It's his work that leads to DNA, for example, because they're looking for control of it. It's not that they're concerned about whether we can have inferior whatever. It's about the effort to control our consciousness and our body to bring in the system, sacrificing their pre-existing power. So transhumanism purports to be augmentation of the human body, and the use of the augmentation of the human body to increase the powers of the human. And so in that, you could go back to Mumford and say that when we have a car and that we become kind of cyborgs in some way. Musk saying that we become cyborgs, which is true with our mobile phones. And Harrington saying that when the contraceptive pill came, which is crucial in the story as well, in the 60s, around the same time, that this was the thing that really, in my view, gave the hippie movement progress. And that she sees that as transhumanism in the sense that it's the use of an external aid to suppress the normal biological functioning of the body. Now, apart from the birth control reason, remember that Steiner says that there would be something which would suppress our spiritual faculty.
Right.
So suppression is transhumanism as well. It's altering the normal expectations of the body. So when we're talking about transhumanism, we're not talking about merely helping someone who's sick receive normal or you recover normal expectations. Because it always starts off, people say, oh, well, spectacles and glasses, isn't that transhuman? I said, no, it's not. If I gave you night vision by genetically re-engineering you, that would be transhuman, no problem. But a pair of glasses is not, because you're just getting what are perceived to be normal expectations of vision, and it's not permanently. You can take them off at night as well. So it's not a permanent change. And there are some things that are less controversial. Posthumanism, on the other hand, now if you look at the graphs of the use of these words, transhumanism is going up, and people are only becoming aware of it. But it's almost the end of the era, because posthumanism is continuing on up, whereas posthuman or transhumanism is leveling off, actually. Now, what people want to do to their bodies is their own business. I don't care what you want to do to your body. If you are above the kind of age of consent and are able to buy cigarettes and drink and all that, well, then you can make those decisions, get married, whatever. You can do it to your body what you want. Well, I'm not going. Obviously, you have some protective role as a parent in relation to your children and choices and all that, but in relation to adults making their own, it's up to them what they do with their body. But what I call network transhumanism, if you want to do to me, you want to alter my body by inserting something, by implanting something, by changing the function, that's a different thing. And this mass transhumanism is really what we have to worry about. Now, posthumanism is an idea. Again, I've written on it in my most recent book, so I'm simplifying it here. I know people say, "Oh, that's not what it is." It's just there's a whole range of different dimensions. I focus on what I call AI-Posthumanism. I say there's a pincer movement that the principles and the philosophy often follows the practice. This is the same thing like Galileo followed on from what the armaments guys were doing in Venice. It comes afterwards often. So the AI is what the military-industrial complex has decided will be the instrument or our control, as Philip K. Dick anticipated, and like the computer, that Mr. Computer falls out of the tree, and these automated systems, see where it's going. This is becoming the lead. So that's going. It's being, and here's the false magic. What do they say about AI? Oh, it's magic. It's not magic. It's sorcery, all right, but it's not just normal magic that happens. Oh, the genie is out of the bottle. Hold on a second. These are deliberately constructed programs. They're not something that has happened unnaturally or out of the blue. So there's a fly on the screen there. I moved off. But the context of AI, I believe, is the military-industrial complex. This order, the New World Order, the system of governance, which intends to not just govern. They don't care about whether you feel safe in the streets. In fact, they want to create chaos in the streets so that you will succumb to this system. We've seen what's happening in China, social credit system, credit, again, behavioral science, Skinner, credit, game. You're going to live in a big computer game, and you're going to be nudged to do what they want to do until it comes into your body fully, and they don't just monitor you, but they can control you, suppress you, say, okay, your time is up. We're going to, after 50, we terminate, whatever they want to do. Once they come in to your
Logan's
body,
Run.
all that. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that they've been telling us, and all this, and the science fiction people have been telling us. What was galling this year was them to come out and pretend, oh, we've just realized artificial intelligence is dangerous. We never realized what a great lie that is, and they've been telling us, going back to Arthur C. Clarke and Hal, and
Right.
sorry, Dave, sorry, Dave, So what a big lie that they can stand there and say, well, we've been working on this, but I never realized, it really is and people have bowed down before these people because they can bamboozle them with mathematics and technical terms, and they have really not confronted the emperor in this drive they have, and their curiosity will destroy us. But anyway, the AI is complemented by a philosophical movement and by a descriptive movement. One, posthumanism, in some ways just describes what's going to happen when AI takes over, that we will be moving, we won't be human any longer in any real sense, that we're becoming a part of the machine, our humanity is not important, will be enhanced. Yeah, you can trust them. Will be enhanced and moved on as a species and change. And this is the Promethean idea. Prometheus is critical to us. The Promethean project. Gerald Feinberger. And yesterday, on Sunday? Yesterday, there was an article by Boris Johnson in the Daily Mail, and in it he was explaining, Now, this is a man who apparently was against the peace process in Ukraine, but he was explaining how great it was with his it's actually a Swedish lawnmower, an AI lawnmower that cuts the grass, how fantastic it is. And this proves all those Luddites, are wrong. These can help us, this AI robot. He's a real blustering clown that, has no shame at all. And
as you guys call him, he's a wanker. He defines
exactly,
wanker.
And in it, actually, and of course, in the same club as David Cameron, there's two things, bullying and club, same process, Tweedledum, Tweedledee, which one do you want? Same as George Bush and Kerry in the Skull and Bones, same Tweedledum, pick your poise. Anyway, so you can take the fool or the one that looks like the nice public school. So he says in that we have to embrace this and he used the word Promethean, which is very, very interesting because it reveals that is that which I've been claiming to be. And in fact, they put an asterisk to explain what Promethean is. But that demonstrated to me what I've been claiming. See, the Promethean figure wants to steal from the gods. They hate the gods. They don't want the gods. They're titans. They're not humans. They're titans. And this is what people forget. They don't want to be humans. They claim to be doing benefits, but it seems to be in spite that they give it to the humans. If you believe the some of the threadbare myths that drive these people. And the Promethean project in the 60s was launched, space travel, all that, continuing on from the British Empire to which they're interested in space travel, intelligence expansion, life extension, following on from the Russian cosmonauts. This was because they said humans have no purpose. We need to give them a purpose. So this posthumanism therefore describes this movement of technology. It also describes a deliberate policy. And in this philosophical posthumanism, which is critical posthumanism, there's a literary thing which merely describes what's happening in literary things, in literary context. And Philip K. Dick is classically regarded as dealing with posthumanist themes, but the implication is that he supports these posthumanist themes, but I don't agree with. And posthumanism in its philosophical movement is a critique of the idea of humanism. It says a number of things, that there's been no fixed idea of what the human is. It's a remarkably dangerous idea. And that when there was a definition of the human, it was only men and privileged men and independent men. So therefore, a lot of the implication, according to the recent textbooks, 2023, Bloomsbury Publishing, etc., you can see them around British Museum, around the area where a lot of these other guys were based, interestingly. They say, we can't have these white cisgendered groups of men who are independent and etc. And we have to support the group. And what they're doing is undermining the existing power structure as they see it, supposedly supporting other groups, and at the same time pulling the rug under notions of humanism and dignity. And I believe this is a very, very dangerous movement. And it comes back to this issue of what is the human, the essential issue that Philip K. Dick was focusing on. What is humanity? What do we mean by humanity? What is the essential feature? Why do we have to protect? And also he foresaw in his post-humanist world, he's describing what will happen on this trajectory. And he begins to put elements, and when he gets this imperial thing, I believe he's beginning to perceive the reality of a constant current that goes through the Atlanticist system, that goes through, from Washington to London, and London, city of London, based on a Roman camp that when William the Conqueror came, he left it. He didn't touch the city of London as a separate, independent area. All those areas fit in and describe an absolute continuous erosion of dispiriting from Huxley in particular, 1863, the X Club. X is the key symbol of this movement. The process to move your spirit off, to give you psychology. We look at your psyche instead. That's okay. Freud, of course, lives in London. Jung comes over, gives this Tavistock lectures in London, where they have later the iteration of the Institute, which was behind the transgender thing. And even Samuel Beckett does psychoanalysis in the 30s in London. It's just a remarkable context where the whole thing is to undermine the human by dispiriting them, by focusing on their behavior, by developing technology which will control the individual in a global governance system, especially as well because they were worried in the 20s. Churchill, who was very close to Wells, wrote an essay, said, will we all commit suicide? Understanding that the atomic bomb would be, as they were beginning to understand what it was, that Wells understood, who was also Leo Szilard, conceived the chain reaction when he's walking across to the British Museum. This is another weird, in the same area, it's really weird. And he conceives it. So they understand that the things that they have unleashed will be uncontainable. And what if, the Fenians got the dynamite as soon as it came up? They began, people forget, backgrounds to Jack the Ripper and that they were blowing up Scotland Yard and things like that. What if they could get their hands on some other, what if anyone else could? So it led to a number of forces coming together, post-colonial, saying we're taking out everything. We have to go for everything because the powers we have unleashed, will come back to us. So post-humanism, in my view, AI post-human, put aside the good bits, the interest in literary people who are doing interesting explorations and showing all the bits and looking at the world and looking at animals' rights and all. Put aside that, and say where we get AI as a practice and a advocacy of that, and put it together with a post-humanist philosophy. This describes the end of humanity, and it's very, very close. And there's a lot of people that don't like humans, that are quite open about that don't think humans are special, that don't think that you're entitled to human dignity. That, for example, when they read Philip K. Dick and his post-apocalyptic scenarios, they criticize him, say he's post-humanist, but they criticize him for being too sympathetic towards the humans who want to maintain their dignity. This is a dangerous philosophy that could justify, in my view, the eradication of not millions but billions of people if it's allied to other daft and dangerous technological things, military industrial complex. Sorry for going on too long there.
No, that was wonderful. Love it. Yeah, it's and I was thinking too, I watched that movie Oppenheimer this weekend. It's pretty overrated, but it's based on a book called The American Prometheus, of course, the nuclear bomb and all that. And then I was thinking, you said about stripped down myths. People forget that in the Prometheus myth, Athena was helping Prometheus. In other words, wisdom was supposed to be part of the process, but that's been stripped down, where you just have,
and his brother, who his brother as well,
Pandora, Pandora is part of it. She was a robot,
and the one the difference between foresight and hindsight, and the need for both of them, So, and also, he's a loser. Really, he's a loser. No, seriously, I'm not joking about this. In a psychic sense, if you look at the use of the idea of the Titan, you'll see that it often ends in failure. I mean, the Titanic is an obvious example. I mean, there's loads of examples. There's loads of examples. It's not, when you begin to say to the gods, we hate you and we're going after you, the gods will have a role, and I believe that. Now, what they want us to do is us to succumb by giving up our conception of whatever divine content, whatever way you conceive that. They want us to give that up and succumb to this daft, half-baked philosophy, which, again, in that area, just where just down the road from where my aunt came in with her cup of tea, and when Elvis died, is the grave of Mary Shelley in London. She lived in Somerstown in London,
Oh,
which
wow.
was also an area. It used to be, before the Irish were there, it used to be Spanish and Portuguese refugees there. We go back a couple of hundred years. Very interesting. But she was the one looking at Aldini and Galvani and the application of electricity to, criminal bodies, anatomy that made them seem alive. She began to understand what these guys were thinking, and particularly her husband, and he was promoting the Promethean idea. And that's why she has this deep insight, a deep, profound insight about where it was going. Not only did she write Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus, she also wrote The Last Man, about the time when there's one person on the earth, and she lived down. I mean, you can walk in 5 minutes from where she lived to where H.G. Wells lived as a student.
Wow.
All the same area.
Amazing.
Invisible Man, all around. It's unbelievable. And when you look at the idea of dystopia, it was articulated by J.S. Mill in relation to policy in Ireland. Most of the dystopian, I've listed them in the recent book, work have a connection with this area, because the dystopian writers were saying, look, this is the consequence of what I'm hearing, what's going on around here. This is what's going to happen. This is what the plan is for you. And I mean, even Orwell didn't think it could be changed. If we look, he was very so that's what most dystopia is, a description of what the artist knows is coming. They either hear it. For example, we can't rule out the possibility that Philip K. Dick knew someone who was a cleaner in Bohemian Grove. It would make sense that he knew some of the debates, because can I say, well, how does he, is he intuitive? Is his intuition so good that everything he gets? And then you say, well, he's also very close to Bohemian Grove, and he listened to people. And
He
there was
at
people,
Berkeley too. Yeah, he was hanging out at
Berkeley as well, and San Francisco, Bohemian Club based there, etc. I think he also had some sources that he was familiar. He was a good listener. He would have had contacts. People would have talked to him. He would engage in conversation. I think he also had more direct knowledge of what was going on than we may think as well. It's just too consistently on target to ignore. Sorry.
Yeah. Well said indeed. And yeah, thinking about the Fabians, and of course we can't forget, people don't understand how out of his mind, or what a sorcerer Lenin was with his God creation, and we're going to be immortal, and ships on the moon. The Bolsheviks were also a bunch of sorcerers too. They're all part of the same, that transhumanistic vibe.
There's no question. The cosmos in Russia.
Yeah. So Graham, now posthumanist versus transhumanism. Did they get to you, Graham? Then maybe they did get to Graham. Well, he'll get back to us. So I guess
I hope you haven't become post-human there, Graham.
Oh, no. I was going to say that's the connection trying to interfere with me for a second there. It's the archons. No, thanks for the explanation. I appreciate the subtleties in there and the nuance. Thanks.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, if you have any questions as we were getting closer to the end, I'm sure, please super chat them. So the question, James, is I agree with you, but what do we do? What can each one of us do to stop the empire, stop this post-humanistic agenda? What's our role as humanists?
Yeah. So both both Elvis and Philip K. Dick are demonstrating values of empathy and of understanding and of humility in relation to the bigger force. That's the great. Again, the same thing in Philip K. Dick. He doesn't come to one conclusion. He says, "Oh, it could be this, could be that, could be that." Because he's being humble before the mystery. So both of them enable the mystery to exist, which the mystery can't exist in the Promethean. They can't have that mystery. It's a left brain driven thing. They can't tolerate ambiguity, which is the essence of a certain type of mind. And that, the psychological tests to prove that, and links with intelligence and ambiguity. The toleration of ambiguity is actually a very high order skill, to be able to say, okay, I can see that this might and that, etc., and to leave them open like that. So both of them emphasize the reality of the spirit and of a transcendent kind of reality. And I emphasize that. And again, in contradistinction, I think, to the Jungian thing, I believe this transcendent thing is a real, the supernatural is the real, that the relinquishing of the belief in the mystery is the great flaw in all of this. The benefit, or the point being that once we begin to understand, it's the point I'm making about Elvis, and that when they say there's something wrong here, we have to find out who we are. You begin to unlock then your potential, the potential that you were told that you didn't have. So ultimately, this is a call to yourself individually to spiritually evolve. Now, you may not be able to save the world, but if there's a critical mass, they will be. Why we should, I listened to Joe Rogan talking to that Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you've seen it. It's kind of shocking.
I'm not going to watch that.
These are the people that they're telling you are godlike. And you don't have to be a genius to work out that that's not what they are. But they can put themselves in godlike power if we relinquish it. So you really want to start having a bit of courage and a bit of faith in your consciousness, and being able to draw inspiration and being able to seek out or support or tolerate differences, to not have too many presumptions because you're told that people from different spiritual traditions are different, that you know that you have nothing in common with a Muslim, for example. I mean, the gross caricature of these. We have to realize that the objective of this New World Order, as described by themselves in what's called an open conspiracy, is the destruction of the nation state, religion, and the family. Now, that's not in the interest of anybody. So they will. Christianity is really in a weak spot, and you know, I'm sure from an Islamic perspective there'd be some people that would say, well, that's great, and we're on that Islam will go as well, and the two of them may go by developing the rifts between them to create the classic divide and conquer. And some, you know, this is the way they have shown that they do historically. So what we have to do is be able to find a common higher ground and use that common higher ground, not to condemn other people because they have different perspectives, but to seek the common ground. And it has to be based on a disciplined analysis that is robust historically, that's not inherently kind of based on an inappropriate description of, you know, whitewashing or blanket glazing of some group of people. But it's to look at the power structures, the pathology in a very, very specific way. From the history of science, all the evidence is there from good historians to describe something which I use what they have told us they're going to do, what the scientists have told us to do. So there has to be that robust analysis. If there's not, and there's an awful lot of red herrings being thrown in, and there's an awful lot of young people listening to a crock, basically, about why we're here, and they're being drawn off, and they're being played very well. And some people, unfortunately, some people that should have known better, have been led down the garden path, and they won't be able to recover from their involvement in bad analysis. I think we have to have a very robust analysis that is added to and grown, so we understand the real historical phenomenon, pathology, and the contemporary nuances of international trade law, of international banking law, international currency thing. The totality, everything has to begin to come together. But even if you defeated the thing, which could take a long time as well, but even if you defeated that, you still cannot deal with the existential problem of having taken away our spiritual condition. So the whole point of this is that in the cosmic order, I believe that this gross, dark reality, the thing, as William Cobbe called it, I think in the 1900s or 1700s, the thing, as he called it, this thing that we're facing, which threatens now to come into your body and mind and to take control of all your genetic structure back to wherever it came from, now and for the future, to dispose of that. As Elon Musk said, they can turn you into a butterfly. This is serious stuff, and especially when you're not even a human, and especially when your rights have been taken away, because we don't have any rights and I don't have human. Notice the proliferation of euthanasia. You know, they take the exceptional case, some poor unfortunate person is dying and they use the exception to become the rule. And the rule then is someone knocking on your door saying, "Oh, you don't have a lot of money in your bank account. Have you thought about this? We can do a quick job now. This is on the way. This is coming. This will come so fast you won't realize until the person's knocking on your door." They're very, very serious. It's a death cult, and they really hate humans. It's misanthropic and it's mechanophiliac. So this is what we're dealing with. This is the call to spiritual arm, to unlock your spiritual potential, to be open-minded, to be tolerant, to be intellectually courageous, to understand that it's an existential threat, that no sect can survive this alone, but there has to be cooperation. And it may be in the cosmic order of things that this is the opportunity we have to find a higher place above our differences, like I think both these figures were suggesting, to have this superposition where we can not only combat that in the vast amount of numbers that we have, but we can also then have the occasion to do what we should be doing, which is to spiritually evolve, and that will also solve the problem of nature. Nature is not going to be protected with more technology, with daft systems that are creating more pollution. The solutions are straightforward. We have enough wisdom, knowledge to be able to solve all the other problems, but we don't have we don't have the luxury to sit back and watch an occult dark force allied to the darker force in the cosmic context, whatever way you want to see it, as these people were understanding in 1964. This is the future, and so therefore, the real thing is to come out of the chrysalis of the cultural containment that will only begin now to turn into poisonous, cannibalizing chemicals in your own self that can lead you nowhere and can lead culture nowhere. So now is the time to begin to be a bit more clever, a bit more sensible, a bit more respectful, a bit more cooperative, a bit more imaginative, and a bit more courageous in doing this. So I don't. It's not counsel to despair, but that's the reality. It does no one any good to pretend that there's no force there.
Beautifully said. Yes, we need a spiritual solution. That's what Dick said. What makes us human is our empathy. Roy Batty could never be human, no can AI. But our ability to care for others in this freak show, as he said, was what made us closer to God.
And
Elvis
so
said
the
the
last
same
point
thing.
on that, I opened up when I've been reading stuff about satanic force. I opened up the exegesis the other day, and he said I had a dream last night where this Philip K. Dick saying I had a dream last night where all the churches were taken over by Satanism, and he begins to talk about that and sacrifice. Yeah, it's in there as well. It's unbelievable. It's quite, and this is what people like Malachi Martin, etc., and other people have said, and and including in that the atheistic materialism as a darker force. But I mean, it's quite remarkable. So. These things are there in whatever way one wants to characterize it, but I purely focus on this elite power structure that has inverted everything now and calls the impoverished people the privileged ones. It's a remarkable transformation that they have done, a deliberate inversion that they are masters and mistresses of, and we have to kind of wake up. I have to grow up, and we have to just be better. And the only way we can be better is to do what some of these began to understand, that when you explore, learn, your capacity then begins to open up. His capacity got better. He was clear on that. His ability to interpret the world improved. These are called the fruits of the Spirit in Christian terms. They're there in all the tradition, the cities, etc. They only come into play when you've committed yourself to and gone on the hero's journey. So, and that's what we're meant to do anyway. So, yeah,
Beautifully
I
said.
agree with what you said.
Yeah, beautifully said. And yeah, and lastly, so do you think that the 60s movement was pretty much engineered?
I do, yeah, I do, yeah.
Hippie, psychedelics, rock music in that area and so forth.
Nearly the whole lot of it, yeah, I do.
Yeah,
And even in the folk music tradition, and I've met a lot of the figures in the Irish folk
really?
music tradition. But people forget that a lot of them were communists, card carrying, and I'm not saying that they didn't or what, but I mean communists, and then became corporate. This going together. If they're the ordinary decent socialists of the past that were worried about the work, they're all gone. There's no one cares about the workers anymore. They're all disappeared because they're
Mhm.
corporatists. This is a movement, a moving target. So I certainly, I mean, how could one glamorize musicians? Look at what happened in the recent medical emergencies. Which ones came out good out of that in a historical context? These are the bootlickers. A lot of them are the bootlickers of power.
Yeah,
Look
yeah, the rebels like Bono and all those idiots
Bono,
just
Bono was a 5-minute walk from me in Dublin. He was brought up in a similar area. He had a bit posher house system, although he always put
really,
himself.
because I had somebody who grew up with him. He, a friend of mine who was Irish, he always said they hated you 2 because they were just drug dealers. They're more than musicians.
Yeah, I missed out. I wasn't interested in them, and I remember getting tickets for, and my friends were, and all that kind of stuff. But I
No.
mean, and later I got interested in them as a phenomenon. But when you look at their friends in relation in power, and the idea that they are in some way representing some radical force, well, I mean, it is just unbelievable. So I mean, when you go through the whole process, yeah, I'm a lot of people are not willing to. They don't want. They're so invested in this musical thing. They're not willing to accept that actually there was a big psyop going on as well. Now, if you look, for example, the last cotton company in Liverpool was closed down just at the time the Beatles come on, and
Mm.
also George Best in football, another long-haired star, the fifth
Right,
Beatle,
right. Yeah.
very charismatic figure. But really, if you look at what people have invested, and I mean everybody, and I include myself up to a certain, but I'm not anymore, hopefully, they've invested their energy in bread and circuses. I mean, this is not a new technique, bread
No.
and circuses. That people can tell me everything about what Liverpool have done, who played what, who scored a goal, going back, what happened in this, what was it, what they ate, all this, but know nothing about anything beyond that. That's a choice you made. That's not just a lifestyle choice. That's a cosmic spiritual choice. You
Mhm.
can't do it that easy. The musical thing, a lot of it. Look at as well what the Beatles did, and a lot of people will not buy this at all. But I mean, if you look at, for example, when C.S. Lewis, I won't go on too long. C.S. Lewis writes about the
As long
Greek
as you want.
ideas of love that Philip K. Dick was talking about. He's always talking about
Yeah.
agape and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
What happens in the 60s? All you need is love, 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 love. What's love? Is something happens on a Saturday night with those new contraceptives you got on the drugs. But that's what it is. This
Yeah.
is a reduction. It's a deliberate working on that concept. So to reduce it, to make it into something, and this is deliberate stuff. Now, as well as that, I mean, this is Chomsky's as well propaganda model. But people think that music is outside that in some way. Now, certainly there's some slipping through the cracks, but a lot of musicians, mainly unbeknownst to themselves, are involved in the system. And then if you look at the ones that realize, for example, a lot of synth pop and electronic music, a lot of them, the poor old devils, didn't live very, very long. And I think they were canaries in the coal mine. They went in and said, oh, it's great technology, we can do this. And they begin to say, hold on a second, this is a nightmare thing that we're going in. I really believe there was an existential crisis that a lot of them, as genuine artists, understood. And if you look back at some of the lyrics on the synth pop, then the sounds kind of there's some deep stuff there that they anticipated, and I think it created an existential crisis. So I'm not saying everyone is, but it's not the ones we may think. And the recent stuff, I mean, look, the Kaiser chiefs. Now, whatever one thinks, I don't care whether one has taken things about all those things that were meant to get from the government into your body. But if you look at the Kaiser chiefs going on stage and saying, "Hands up if you got the Moderna, blah blah blah," and hands up, it was one of the most. It's really a disgusting representation of the corruption of art and music. So I think we've given too much notice and attention and power to what has been presented to us. It's part of the illusion, and really the traditional power of music was often, if you see it in the Irish context, they sit in a circle on the side. They're not taken over. They're not often, and the music, the context, the meaning. It was often revolutionary. It was often used as revolutionary purpose because it came from the community. This stuff is propaganda. So a lot of people don't want to look at the depth of that, but they have to really be able to examine the particular pathology of the industry, where it came from, where the technology came from, where the investment came from, remember in Britain, we're coming from a society which was heavily governed, the rationing period, etc., and everything was governed with its Ministry of Information, that etc., where the Ministry of Truth came from, and people believe that all that stuff disappeared. When G.K. Chesterton, when he writes his book in 1907, The Man Who Was Thursday, when the anarchist joins the anarchist organization, they're nearly all police. All the other anarchists were undercover police. This thing has been going on for ages. I'm very, very skeptical. So you can't rely on other people. You can't rely on other groups. These people are not your friends, the big entertainers. We know that. They're working in the propaganda model that has been well established. It doesn't matter whether left or right. It's the same thing. We're talking about corporatism, transnational corporatism. They know how to play our emotions. Last point on this. It's quite amazing. If you take ABBA's music, okay, the Swedish example from someone from here, and you don't listen to the music and you read the lyrics and pay attention to the lyrics, it's not good for your, a lot of it is about losing, about surrendering, about, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm losing, I'm going to lose again, I'm waiting for someone to ring, please come. It's really loser stuff. It's not really empowering. And this is the stuff that we're subjecting ourselves to. And they're very good at putting this stuff into our psyche. And this is not what the great music, the great Enlightenment, the great sopranos, the great Gregorian chant. This is not what the things were about. They're about increasing our spirituality, as we see in groups who are oppositional, like in the African spiritual. You can feel the power in that, because there was power in that, because there was real emotion, real hope, real spirituality, real power in it. But this is not what we're getting. We're getting constantly, and loads of people that are very, very critical of a lot of other things. They won't let go that maybe all this stuff that they believe in about this music and about how these figures were great liberationary forces, now how Mick Jagger and that were really revolutionary and all this kind of stuff.
No, not at all. At least our generation, we had, at least we're confident to say that the grunge movement was true, because they all died. Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, Sinead O'Connor, all the heroes of the 90s couldn't deal with reality, or were eliminated, like Kurt Cobain, because you can't have this kind of a mind. And then it always reminds me of Roger Waters in the 60s, like socialism. And then in Dark Side of the Moon comes, and he admits, is like, oh my God, my bank account is just so big. I feel so guilty. But at least Roger Waters, I would say he is not sold out from his former intent.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There are a few still.
Yeah, there's a few. Van Morrison, in fairness to him, as well as but also he's one of the only people. He has that great song, "Tuple O' Honey" as well, which goes back,
Yeah.
which has
Yeah.
a reference. It's a beautiful song, a reference, and he was working with African American musicians early on, and that again a reference back to Elvis. Whether don't know much came in the song and his birthplace, but he also was one of the few musicians that talked about mysticism and is serious about mysticism. You know, and the mystic is coming through the work and into the mystic, etc. So it's a kind of vindication in a way of their willingness. Of course, he's regarded as a madman now because he went against an orthodoxy and complained
Same with
about
Eric
fascism.
Clapton. Eric Clapton is also.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
no longer
So,
God.
yeah. No, it's remarkable. So I get loads of people telling me about the fascism I'm worried about. I'm always curious about which fascism they're talking about. And like for example, Philip K. Dick anticipated, as you know, the left fascism. I mean, that's people ignore that. But the final point of Philip K. Dick, I think he's a Trojan horse. I think they've misunderstood what he's saying. I think you cannot understand Philip K. Dick without understanding the depth of his spiritual awareness, and that when he's talking about things being like a simulation, or we didn't get around to that, we can do it some other time.
Sure.
He's not denying spiritual reality. He's affirming spiritual reality, and he's not affirming a pure materialist explanation of the universe. He's affirming ancient wisdom, that we can see in all the cultures, in Buddhism, in the Vedanta. He's justifying perennial wisdom, So again, we keep coming back to this base, and having. And last point on this, going back to it's very interesting about the Irish travelers. So these were poor people, marginalized. They had high infant mortality, huge problems with alcoholism, violence, etc. So a lot of them became settled in Britain, etc., and in Ireland. And if you look at these marginalized people, when I was young, now you have Tyson Fury, who's 6'10", world heavyweight champion.
No.
A lot of his brothers, they're huge, powerful in one generation. And you say, well, how is it's an interesting thing. In the last generation, the people who have been outside the system are prospering, and the people in the system are declining. So you have these kind of figures that have stuck to their guns about spirituality. They're often very religious still, in their own way, but they've stuck to the spirituality. They've stuck to the family. They've stuck often to their own nation, the rules that existed. They've stuck to traditional roles, masculine and fighting things, etc. And the gods are delivering them in their own way, for being outside the system. It's a thing that people should actually look at. And when Fury is fighting Deontay Wilder, another big guy, he's fighting a person who came from another similar deprived context. And you begin to say, well, the people in the system are not prospering so much. There's lessons we can learn from looking and studying and being aware of the context of all in relation to resilience. It's often people who stand outside the mainstream that survive this studies on anthropological studies on cultural resistance in the Caribbean, in relation to groups that manage to survive. Often it's because they reject what's given them on a plate. They reject the sweet pablum that's presented to them.
Oh, well said indeed. Yes, everybody, please listen to James. He's right. Take his advice because, this is serious, but we're going to get through. It's going to be all right.
Yep.
It's going to be all right. Well, we are at the end. Thanks for the support for the audience. Great comments I see in the chat section. Thanks for the kind words. Next week, we will have James True will join us to talk about his new book, The Black Eye Club. So if you're wondering why you see celebrities with black eyes, we're going to get into more conspiracy and more about technology. So We've only just begun, as Karen Carpenter sang. And she's also considered one of the great drummers in history. Most people don't know what a drummer she was, beyond a talented musician. But yeah, we are at the end. Graham, thanks for keeping us company.
You're very welcome. I agree with everything James said. I see our two biggest challenges are division is more profitable than union. And, while we have the wisdom, we need the self-discipline to stop ourselves. Tag.
Well said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We only need like 10 or 20% of us to push,
That's it.
and
Yeah.
things will get tilted. The butterfly effect. Study on the butterfly effect. We can disrupt. So James, yeah, I do have, maybe you want to tell the audience where to find you. I've got your website,
Yeah,
which will be in the
that'll do
show.
fine. They'll have a look there. They'll see other interviews and that. And I'll put this interview linked up there as well for other people to see. And yeah, that's a good start.
Awesome. Yeah, go to jamestunney.com and check it out. He's got everything there. And yeah, check out his books. We've just scratched the surface, and he lays out amazing blueprints in all his books. So James, as always, yeah, enjoyed our chat and look forward to do something on the simulation and Philip K. Dick in the future.
Yeah. Thanks, Graham. And thanks, Miguel, as always. And your work, as with others, is an inspiration, and it's part of the mystic murmuration, and we reinforce each other, and we meet on a different level and provide the support of the next of the invisible army that is forming, that will invoke the Great Spirit and the Holy Spirit across boundaries, because there can only be at the top a similar spirit, and we have to partake and be inspired and be open to it. So I appreciate your work. You've been doing a long time and an inspiration to many people, and I enjoy the conversations and look forward to hello, Dominic down there. Thanks for listening. Appreciate that, and good luck to your work as well, and the Hopscotch Chronicles, and to everyone else who's listening.
Good podcast. Good podcast. So awesome. Well, thank you, James. Everybody, I hope you have a good rest of your week. You have a happy Monday, and we will see you soon. As I always say, write your own gospel, live your own myth, and thank you for being here. Take care, everybody.